I'm getting there. Turn me down some, son, please. It's hard to hear myself. Too critical for that. Good morning, everyone. We'll be back in Mark chapter 15. Justin, would you open us in a word of prayer, please?
Father God, we thank the Lord for allowing us to come to your house of worship. I ask you to be with Brother Jeremy, Lord. Hide behind the cross as he speaks truth from your word today. Give us ears to hear, hearts to learn. I just pray that we be able to apply so much in our Christian lives throughout the week, Lord. Please also be with our upcoming service, be a preacher as he gives the word. We also be with Dr. Lewis as he starts teaching his new class, Body, Soul, Spirit. We thank you for all the learnings that's going on campus today.
Mark chapter 15, we started it last week. It's a great chapter. And Brother Ivan, I want to see the shock on your face for this, right? We did not finish last week's lesson. In fact, it's probably the shortest. I don't know how many pages there were, but we really just got past page 1, like the very beginning of top of page 2. And so, Justin, this is my routine. Every Sunday morning, I get up 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I go over the notes. Basically, you just rewrite them. It makes them, preacher calls them hot notes. That's a good term. I don't have a better term. But it's a chance to make them alive again. And so I went over them. I condensed them down. I said, I want to make sure we cover some of this stuff with the intention, but have an intention of not going back and doing all of it, just covering it. And then went further in. We actually start the crucifixion this morning. And so, I don't want to short that either. So I got it all ready and got here. And I walked in the back because then you get here. I try to get here about an hour early and you'd go over it again. Just because, I know there's nothing up there and it needs that much review. And so I get over here and with Brother Rick, with this thought of, I don't know how I'm going to do all this. I don't know what I'm going to, I don't know if I might have to abbreviate that part from last week even more. And so I get here and that part from last week I left at home. So, Ben, I live 2 minutes from here. And I have 2 other people that are going to show up, so I could have called and said, hey, it's right here in this spot, looks like this, bring it. But I said, no, maybe really just want to spend that much extra time looking at the beginning, the start of the crucifixion. So that's the intent for this morning. It is a picture of the trials. Usually when people look at it, it'll be announced this way. It's the trial of Jesus by Pilate, but it's anything but the trial of Jesus. Okay, it's the trial of Pilate. It's the trial, if we go to another book, it's the trial of Pilate, then it's the trial of Herod. Then it's the trial of the religious. Then it's the trial of the crowd. And really, if we apply it, it's the trial of us, because the questions that are asked, should I release him? Is he innocent? The question, should I release him, is really this. It is Jesus who he says he is? Because if he is, then he's got no reason to be where he is. So the first question was, should I release him? To which they cried, give us Barabbas. It's followed by the second question. Brother Doug, it's good to see you. The second question is, okay, if I'm going to give you Barabbas, then what do I do with him? And that's the question we all have to answer. That's the question where we're all on trial. It is, what are you going to do with Jesus in your life? And here's one of the things I can't ever get over, and I think we struggle with. God gives us that choice. He is God, and he gives us the choice to say, what are you going to do with me? God gives man the power to shake our fist and say, I deny you. That is so important for us to understand. Because you know what we have to do to other people? We have to allow them choice. And quite often what we try to do is take that away and manipulate responses. But Justin, God's smarter than me. He is. Thank you for that. And you know how he works? Through choice. Anyway, so there's 2 questions. And the third question, he asked, God no answer. There's no evil in him. What has he done? That's because there was no answer. What he's done is love the world. And those who failed the trial, well, the religious failed the trial, and the government failed the trial, and the crowd failed the trial, and we can't afford to fail the trial. And so we started last week looking at the trials, and if you want to call it the trial of Jesus, but it's much more than that. This morning, we move into a different passage. I don't know how. Let's just do this. I'm just going to read it. We're going to back up one verse. We're going to begin in verse 15. And so Pilate, and I want you to pay attention to the topic of this. Okay. Rob, here's one. I'm telling you we're starting a look at the crucifixion this morning. If you were telling me that, in my mind I have a certain picture. Okay, what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to look at, what is the main subject. Okay, but that's what pops into my head. But when I read this passage in Mark, it doesn't exactly tie in with what usually pops in my head. Okay. Verse 15 really covers like the whole thing in just a few words. And then I want you to kind of see what the topic of all the rest of these verses are. Verse 15, and so Pilate, willing to content the people, there's Pilate, man pleaser. That's what he's, Donnie, Pilate the man pleaser. That almost like pushed it off, because really the truth is, he wasn't trying to please anybody. He was trying to keep it best for him. And he couldn't afford to have another riot. Pilate the selfish. Then Pilate said unto them, what evil hath he done? That's verse 14, verse 15. And so Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas unto them and delivered Jesus when he had scourged him to be crucified. Boom. You understand how much that verse covers. He was scourged. He was brought out. They asked. They declined. They want Barabbas. He's sent to be crucified. Verse 16. And the soldiers led him away into the hall called Praetorium, and they called together the whole band. Now, this is a cohort, and people argue about how much is a cohort. A cohort is a tenth of a legion. Is the legion 6,000? Is the legion 4,800? People go back and forth. I don't know, but it's a lot of people. He's delivered to the soldiers, and the soldiers say, bring in the whole band, minimum 480 people. Everybody needs to come and watch this, all take part. And the soldiers led him away into the hall called Praetorium, and they called together the whole band, and they clothed him with purple and plaited a crown of thorns. Now, what had already happened? He'd already been scourged. His body's already ripped open. There's already no skin left. Many times people would die from this scourging. And if they didn't, often the only reason they didn't die from this scourging is because they crucified him too quickly after the scourging. You can't say what killed him. Sometimes, Brother Hank, when the cat of nine tails would come across, it would lodge into the belly, and it would rip the muscle tissue away to the point that the entrails would fall out. But Kevin, he doesn't cover any of that stuff. He just says he was scourged. You understand, in my head, you know what always pops up? What that meant, the picture. They plaited a crown of thorns and put about his head. They put a robe on that place where there was no skin. You know what that robe became? And began to salute him, Hail, King of the Jews. And they smote him on the head with a reed, and did spit upon him. And bowing on their knees, they worshipped him. You starting to get a picture of what's going on here? And when they had mocked him, that's what's going on here. Oh, this is what we would do if it's Caesar. This is how we treat the king, down on the knee. Oh. And this is a clown show. And they're making, in their mind, the Son of God the clown. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple from him and put on his own clothes on him and led him out to crucify him. So just after all that became his skin, you know what they did? They ripped the skin off. And they put something else on him to become skin. Miss Melissa, you know what's going to happen to that? It's going to get ripped off too. Brother Ivy, this is what's going on in my head. This is what I read. And they compel one Simon, a Cyrenian, who passed by, coming out of the country, the follower of Alexandra and Rufus, to bear his cross. And they bring him unto the place Golgotha, which is being interpreted, the place of a skull. And they gave him to drink wine mingled with myrrh, but he received it not. He could not pass on any of the suffering. He was taking all of the suffering. Wanted no narcotic, no matter how little it might have helped. And when they had crucified him, look, they crucified him. They scourged him, they crucified him. We're getting a lot of information, but none of this is about what's happening. None of this is about the physical pain. Notice what all of this is talking about. And when they had crucified him, they parted his garments, casting lots upon them what every man should take. And it was the third hour, and they crucified him. Also notice this. Mark's given a whole lot of details. This is eyewitness stuff. Okay, if you want to argue, anybody, if this wasn't true, do you understand? The church doesn't grow. It is proved as untrue in the very beginning. He gave too much information to just pass through. And it was the third hour, and they crucified him. And the superscription of the accusation was written over, the King of the Jews, again mocking him. And with him they crucified two thieves, the one on his right hand, the other on his left. And the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, he was numbered with the transgressors. And they that passed by railed on him, wagging their heads and saying, thou destroyest, you're the one who's going to destroy the temple, thou that destroy the temple and buildest it in 3 days? You're the one who's going to become the only way to God? This is going to go out and you're going to replace it? Save thyself and come down from the cross. Likewise also the chief priests mocking said among themselves with the scribes, he saved others, himself he cannot save. Verse 32, let Christ the King of Israel descend now. Look what they called him. Justin, they are wanting him dead because they said he blasphemed when he said he's the Christ. Now they call him, let Christ, the King, the one who's supposed to be ruling Israel, descend now from the cross, so we may see and believe. And they that were crucified with him reviled him. Even those on his left and on his right mocked him. Lorraine, if you told me we were going to look at the crucifixion, in my head, I am preparing to deal with the physical pain. If you watch any movie, it's all going to be based upon the physical pain. If you read a book, Matt, it's going to go into great detail of the physical pain of the crucifixion, of the physical pain of the scourging. Most sermons I can remember dealing with the crucifixion spend all of their time dealing with the physical pain. Mark does not. Doug, this passage is not about physical pain. He was scourged, he was crucified, and there they crucified him. It is all about shame. It's all about mocking. It's all about him being torn down. Do you have Philippians chapter 2? Let this mind be in you, we know this verse, which was also in Christ Jesus. What mind? 2:6. Who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself, 7, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of man. Understand, Justin, you know where we're at right now. Where the glory of God was in heaven. He laid aside the glory of God and took on the humility of humanity. Okay? So he laid aside this and replaced it with, if we want to be nice, the dignity of manhood, whatever that is. But at least, even if I'm trying to be nice, the dignity of humanity, what is it compared to the glory of God? Okay, so he laid that aside and took on this. Next verse, verse 9. Wherefore God hath highly exalted, go back to verse 8, I'm sorry, you're right. Thank you, brother. And being found in fashion of a man, he humbled himself and became obedient even unto death, even the death of the cross. Now, Justin, here's where usually we're going to go into all of the physical pain of the cross. What we need to understand is it's more than just physical pain. It's the shame. You see, he left the glory of heaven. He took on the humanity of manhood, the dignity of manhood. And at the cross, even that dignity was stripped from him. The cross even takes the dignity of humanity. My dad was in the military. I spent 8 years over in Europe. I visited Dachau. I read everything I could. I watched everything. I read the Anne Frank, and I read In His Steps. In fact, Corrie ten Boom is one of my favorite writers. I love reading her. I love listening to her. I've searched YouTube for Corrie ten Boom. If she's talking, I've watched it. But you know, one of the saddest things when you look in it, it's not just the deaths. It's the stripping of humanity. It's the stripping of the dignity. If you read the things they made a son do to his father, or a mother do to the daughter, or they took away all the dignity. See, how far can we push them? They treated them worse than beasts. That is what this chapter is talking about. They stripped away his dignity. They stripped away his humanity. Hebrews chapter 12, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him. Do you know what that joy is? Rick, that joy is you and me. The joy set before him is that you and I, because of the cross, get to spend eternity with him. He valued us to the point that he's the author and finisher of the faith, who for the joy that was set before him, what did he do? He endured the cross, despising the shame. He disregarded the shame. He counted the shame as nothing. When we think of the cross, most of the time we think of physical pain. Okay, it's the physical pain, and then we're good Christians, so we know the physical pain gets to a place where now it's separation, and so we look at the physical pain, but we know the biggest challenge is the separation from God, and boom, Matt, now I got it right. But in all of this, Mark concentrates on the shame. The cross, he suffered physical punishment. He took on our sin, which don't ask me to explain that. Well, I can't explain that. I can be thankful and grateful, but he takes on our sin. Sin equals shame. Sin is shameful. When he takes on our sin, he takes on all of our shame. Shame is just a word we try to take out of our society. This is what I did like Wednesday, Thursday. Talking about shame. No, we're talking about shame. Boy, I figured this out. Genius. This passage is about shame. So I start looking for good illustrations so we can illustrate shame. This is the best one I found. Okay, the best. A preacher's writing, and he writes about it, and he says, when I was in 6th grade. Donnie, come on. I already know this is a weak illustration. I'm 55 or 6 or something years old. I don't want to do the math right now. It's depressing. Matt, the biggest thing I can come up with is when I was in 6th grade. When I was in 6th grade, I was in Catholic school, and I had a nun who dedicated her life to poverty and to trying to help me, and I made fun of her name. And you know why that is that we don't want to live in that shame. And the first thing we try to do is remove shame. And we want to blame somebody else for the shame, and we want to excuse why we did it, and we want to, but the truth is, we're just sinful. And sin brings shame. And he took on our sin, and that means that all of that shame had to be poured upon him. And when the sin and the shame get there, there's going to be a spiritual penalty, and that is the separation. And all of this is what takes place at the crucifixion. And here is where we should say, this is the cost for our salvation. Oh, the love of Jesus. Why so much concentration on shame? And then I just spaced out and quit asking why the concentration. Why did Mark write this? Because somebody's out there just going to say, well, because the Holy Spirit told him to. I know. So then I went from that. Ben, why was there so much hatred? Why was there so much animosity? Why was there so much attack? Why are all these groups going at him so much? You know, the world of academia will tell us that he's just a good guy who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's why this happened. That does not elicit this much hate. There might be an accidental arrest, an accidental imprisonment from time to time, but it does not bring this much hate and this much attack. Say, God never claimed to be, and so this just accidentally happened. You know, that's the garbage they try to push. This is going to take too much time, but I want to read this. So, anybody know who Anne Rice is? Anne Rice is extremely famous. She was an atheist, not an agnostic. She was an atheist the majority of her life. Anne Rice is famous for writing things like Vampire Diaries or Interview with a Vampire, or I don't know all of her books, but I know she had 26 #1 best-selling novels. We're not even talking about just on the bestseller list. We're talking about #1, 26. Okay. Now, part of that, Matt, is because when she does a novel, she does extreme research. Like if she's going to have them in an opera house in Austria somewhere, she'll examine that opera house. She wants to know the history of it. She'll have pictures of it. When she talks about the handle, she'll know the shape of the handle. She puts tremendous detail in research before she writes it. Well, she started out to write a novel about Jesus Christ. I think the name of it was Jesus Christ Out of Egypt. And who knows, they'll probably make a movie about that. But Rick, in her research, which is what she's going to do, an atheist for well over 30 years, she began to research. The end of the research has her spending her life from that point now in church and arguing against academia. Amen. In fact, she put this at the back of the novel, and I think it's since been removed, but I want you to read some of what I want you to hear some of what she said. This deals with the skeptical argument, and basically she's going to make this point that the skeptical argument that attacks the fact whether Jesus made these claims or not, because that's what it's about, trying to make him just a good guy. She says it's the worst and most biased scholarship she's ever encountered in her research. 26 novels she's researched for. But she writes this: what gradually came clear to me was that many of the skeptical arguments that insisted most of the Gospels were suspect, for instance, or written too late to be eyewitness accounts, or they just lacked coherence, they were not elegance, arguments about Jesus himself, these arguments were full of conjecture. Some books were no more than assumptions piled upon assumptions, absurd conclusions based upon these assumptions, and these things were reached on the basis of little or no data at all. Now, at this point, doing this research, she's an atheist. She's not challenging them. She would love for them to be right. She's coming from the viewpoint they are. She's just looking to have it make sense. In sum, the whole case for the non-divine Jesus who stumbled into Jerusalem and somehow got crucified by nobody for doing nothing and had nothing to do with the founding of Christianity and would be horrified by it today if he knew about it, because that's the push. When we send our children off to state schools, this is what they're going to be taught. So, Brother Jeremy, are you scared of that? No, I'm not afraid of that. This is what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid we haven't prepared them enough in church to be able to handle that. Amen. But I am not afraid of any argument. I don't want to have to send my children away to learn. I want them to learn before they go. In sum, the whole case for the non-divine Jesus who stumbled into Jerusalem and somehow got crucified by nobody and had nothing to do with the founding of Christianity and would be horrified by it if he knew about it. That whole picture, which was floated in the liberal circles I frequent in as an atheist for 30 years, that case was not made. Not only was it not made, I discovered in this field some of the worst and most biased scholarship I ever read. And it goes on to make this claim, that the more she studied, the more she realized that these scholars, who were supposedly Christian scholars, hated Jesus. Okay, that's what's going on here in Mark 15. As a result of hating Jesus, they mock, they tear down, they dispute, they try to bring shame. Again, Brother Rick, welcome to Mark 15. Why did they hate him so much? Well, the answer we just read. Here you go. Verses 16 to 20, the soldiers mocked him. Why did they mock him? Because his claim was that he's the king. They smote him, they spit upon him, they took a crown, they made a crown, they beat it into his head, they bowed and teased him. In 24, they stripped him because that's part of losing your dignity. In 26, Pilate says, King of the Jews. In 29, the people say, you're the one who's going to destroy the temple? You're the one who's going to be the way to God? That's why they mock him. It's his claims. You're the Son of Man. The religious, you're the Messiah. You're the Christ. They mocked him because of his claims. And I'm going to tell you, those claims are still bringing challenge today. It is in the human nature to dislike the claims of Jesus. The flesh is at enmity with the Spirit. What can we see about this mocking? A couple things. One, there is absolute hostility to the claims of Jesus. Son of God, Son of Man. He's the only way. He is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. You know why there's so much hostility? Because those claims require of us. That's it. They require something of us. They require submission, they require surrender, they require obedience, they require worship. Jesus' claims force us to make a decision, and this decision is an all or nothing decision. And we don't like to give up that control. Nobody wants to be told what to do. He's God. You know what that means? Make him God, and he's God. We're not anymore. When he's God, we're not the deciding factor. How's little Ben? 15. Oh, perfect. You know what's in little Ben's head right now? Oh, don't even guess. I'm just going to tell you one thing, and it's close to the top. It's I can't wait till I get out of here, because when I leave this house, nobody's telling me what to do. Please make sure he doesn't join the army with that attitude. Because that's usually what happens. No one's going to tell me what to do. Tell me when to breathe. I just can't wait until I'm the master of my fate, the captain of my ship. Wednesday, Angie. Wednesday, I was one more chair over. I'm sitting right there Wednesday night, and I walk in, and Jessica's daughter's sitting in the back, and she sees me walk in, and it's the greatest feeling in the world. That little girl sees me. Sometimes it's not the greatest feeling because she sees me and she gives me that ugly look. But sometimes she sees me and it's just like, because she knows I have candy for her. I said, Brother Jeremy, you bribe her every single chance I get. There's candy in the truck right now, and if she were here, I'm running out to get it. So I come in, and she's got this great big smiley face, and I didn't have candy. I had fruit snacks. So I walk in, and she got this big grin, and she starts talking out loud. There's Mr. Jeremy. There's Mr. Jeremy. Preacher's preaching away. I was late. So I get them out real quick, and I give them to her. She quiets down. She's eating them. But then she's digging towards the bottom of the package. And that starts making a little noise. And it's dead quiet in here. It's the preacher and a plastic wrapper. So I turn around, I look at her and say, Ellie, shh. She stops doing anything, looks at me, gets the most wicked look on her face I've ever seen her have, smiles big, takes that wrapper and goes. Because 3 years old, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Nobody puts baby in the corner. The claims of Jesus require we make an all or nothing statement. And we don't like it. Now, I'm sure there's good stuff in there. But I want to get to this. Brother Ivy, everything I've said so far, to me it's like automatic amen getters. Sometimes we might not look at it, but when I talk about it, it's true. We're Sunday school, we go to church. Lorraine, this is just stuff we need to hear, but when we hear it, it agrees with us. It agrees with our spirit. Where it doesn't agree is when we start to apply it. You see. But Doug, understanding his suffering included shame and accusation and mocking. Okay, it puts a total different dimension on take up your cross and follow me. Okay. Changes things. I'm going to do this, and then we'll see how much time, but I need to do this quickly. My wife listens and watches all these stupid old movies. As a result, you know what I have to do? Go in the other room or pretend to watch these stupid old movies with her. The boys gave up a long time ago, but still I try once in a while. And I don't know where this was, a long time ago. In fact, she left the room and didn't watch this movie. But I finished it. She doesn't really like Cagney. And it's a Cagney movie. It's Cagney and Bogart and somebody else. And 1938, I think it won some awards. 1938, you know what the film quality is on a 1938 black and white movie? It's called Angels with Dirty Faces. I'm going to quickly, I actually sent Eric a clip, but clip takes longer than hopefully I can walk through this. And this morning I went down and watched it so I can remember the dialogue exact. I don't want to fudge it. So, two people, they grew up, met when they were 6 years old. They grew up in Hell's Kitchen. Terrible, rough time. And one ended up being a murderer, Cagney. The other ended up being a priest. And it's the end of the movie. Cagney's caught. He's in jail. And the priest comes to visit him. And you know, the whole block just idolizes Jimmy Cagney. Guy who'll take nothing off of no one. fought his whole way through life. And they just idolize him. So now he's caught, he's in jail, he's getting ready to be put to death. And the priest comes to visit him, the father, his friend since 6 years old, Father Conley. He comes to see him. And he says, I have a favor to ask you. I'm in jail. What are you gonna ask me? Go ahead. Okay, whatever, shoot, ask. Rocky was his name. Suppose I ask you to be scared tomorrow when they take you to the electric chair. Suppose I ask you to scream for mercy. Suppose I ask you to look yellow. And he looks at the Jerry, me, die yellow? I want you to have courage, Rocky, but it's a different kind of courage. It's the kind born in heaven. Imagine that coming, like in a movie. Tells you it's 1938. It's not your man-made swagger, your bravado. I want the courage where only you and I and God will ever know. That's the kind of courage I'm looking for. I want you to let the boys down, Jerry. You've been a hero to those boys. They want to be just like you. I want to prevent that. The only hope is for you to be shamed. For them to look and say, I don't ever want to be like that. Rocky responds, you're asking me to pull an act, Jerry? You're asking me to turn yellow? To give up the only thing I have left? And what is that? That's his name. It's his dignity. That's his pride. You're asking me to let go of my pride? Nothing doing. You're asking too much. You want to help those kids? Think of a new way. Jerry to Rocky. It's you or those kids, Rocky. If you go out in glory, they're going to go out in shame. They're going to end up right here where you are. But if you will take on the shame, their lives can be saved. So next morning they go to get him, they're taking him out. They open the cell and he even punches one of the guards. Looks like he's going to go out the way he came in. Right before he gets to the door, he starts to scream and yell, and you see a smile on the priest's face. I watched it this morning, and I looked under the comments, and here were the first comment. Sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is put love before personal dignity. Jesus took on shame and saved us. But Brother Ivy, sometimes the only thing that matters to us is our own personal dignity. I got 3 minutes. Probably 2 minutes. While I'm doing this, I'm getting a text from my brother. I know you're busy, bro, so I'll be brief. I'm all of a sudden and surprisingly having so many issues. I'm not doing what I know I should. I'm having anxiety attacks randomly throughout the day. I know I'm not a victim, but I sure feel like one. You know what that is? That's fighting for the fact that I am. My world is imploding. Now I've started saying horrible things about God, because you want to know what happens? Here's what happens when the pain and the struggle gets there. If we're not careful, we're going to blame him. I've started saying horrible things about God and this being his fault. He goes on and on. Here. What do you say, Justin? Well, here's what I can say. Jason, all you're doing is exposing your own pride. You see, you think you know how life should be, your life should be. You think you know better than God. You're not getting what's right, so you're angry at him. You're blaming him. You're not trusting him. See, you're the master of your own fate. And this is how it should be, and he's not living up to it. On and on and on. You know, in the beginning of every list in the New Testament where he talks about what it's like to be a Christian, it begins with humility. On the cross, we see perfect humility. And Justin, we're to take up our cross. It changes life, and our effect on others. I'm out of time. Brother Doug, will you close in a word of prayer this morning?
Gracious